Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of Friday Morning at the Fun House. And boy, did he have lots of fun last night, Mr. Martin Popoff. What's going on, my friend?
Yeah. I'm amazed. It's good that I'm not hungover today in any shape or form. Tim and I behaved ourselves. So we went to Metallica last night, and it was great. And you could check out. We just posted a whole review of it, a Contrarians episode. But yeah, it was good. They were played in the round. Weird set list, as we put in our title of the show. It was a very strange set list. There's a lot of hits that were not in the set.
Wow.
And yeah, it was in the round. The sound wasn't the greatest, but yeah, they were absolutely on fire. I think two takeaways that I'll leave you with. The Day That Never Comes is just a heart wrenching, awesome late period song of theirs. I think it's the best semi ballad they've ever done. So that was a highlight of the set. Tim and I both looked at each other, guys. Yeah, that is really cool. And James singing is just off the charts. He is singing so well with power, hitting all the notes, not even trying to duck anything.
Okay.
So it's really good. Actually, one more thing I'll leave you with. You know, Lars has so much energy for being able to do this after so many years. I've had people kind of talk to me a little bit about, I've heard some good insights about how a lot of these thrash bands have had to replace their drummers with younger people,
Yep.
and this is one band that just keeps doing it, and they played a lot of songs fast, and his double bass was good, and he was very very on the edge with that Larsness of screwing up the beat and starting the fills early and all those weird things that is such a Lars trademark. So yeah, he was absolutely on fire as well. So yeah, good show overall.
Cool. Yeah, I've never thought Metallica in the round would be like a good idea. But apparently it's okay, right? I mean, it's just that they don't seem like the type of band for that experience, right?
Yeah, it's the whole in the round thing is a little bit strange because the guys do look kind of they do look kind of alone up there, right? There's something non-rock starry about them. It's like they're walking out onto one of those catwalks all the time,
Yeah.
right? And they're just kind of walking around. There would be pauses, and there'd be background music, and the drums would disappear, and then they'd pop up in another place. So Lars's drums moved around as well. So yeah, it's kind of funny. And as I remarked in the review I did, it's like I don't even recall where the amps were. I didn't really register, right? And the lights are good, but they're fairly simple. Big screens and stuff, these round tubular screen things. So yeah, it was good, but yeah, something, I thought about it this morning, and there's just something maybe more magical about just seeing a band there. The drummer's on the riser in the back, there's a row of amps, and everybody's focused and looking
That's
in
the
one
way it's
direction.
always been, right? Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I know like bands like, Yes have been doing the round thing for years and years, and maybe for a band like that it works. But I just to me, like you want Metallica up there on the stage, you're in the front of the stage, and the wall of sound comes out at you, and that's the way it should be, right? Not this whole
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
like thing, and yeah, but hey, whatever, it's something
yeah,
different for them.
yeah, yeah.
Did they have an opener last night?
Yeah, Suicidal Tendencies, pretty compromised lineup. It's really just Mike Muir, and I think it's Rob Trujillo's son, I think, on bass. And then everybody else pretty new, and then Pantera, and yeah, Pantera, same kind of thing. It was just the sound was not great for Pantera, and it's just these guys are separated by so much distance, and they're just all walking around kind of on their own. Zach had these weird orange boots on. But yeah, it's so it was a very strong lineup, that's for sure.
Okay.
Packed, absolutely packed too, in a stadium, right? Not an arena, not the hockey arena, but the big baseball stadium.
So you're like 50, 40, 50,000 people probably.
Yeah, yeah, they had a renovation there recently, but given that the floor is pretty full, and they reduced that place used to hold, I think, in the neighborhood of 53. And I think now for baseball games, if it was absolutely full, maybe 44, something like that. So yeah, it definitely had to be, well over 40,000 people. Yeah.
That's a good draw. Yeah,
Yep.
pretty good. Cool. I'm glad you had a good time. That's
Yeah.
It's good to get out. It was like a last minute thing, right?
Yeah, and I apologize I missed the show last night, but yeah, check out the you guys did it. You know the Guitar Hack show, so that's good that that went ahead. So
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, we had a good time. It was good, definitely a good show. So, but
yeah,
we missed you, Martin. So, all right. So here we are once again, continuing on with our look at favorite productions from some of the more notable producers, and we haven't talked about this, but seeing as we just lost Roy Thomas Baker, maybe we shoot him up for the next episode, right?
it's a
Probably.
great idea. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
so Roy Thomas Baker will be in 2 weeks. But today it's all about Martin Birch. So this is actually a funny story. So earlier in the week, I'm getting my list ready, and everybody knows if you've been watching the last couple episodes, we've been doing like our favorite five. So I'm sitting here like fretting, like how am I going to pick just five of these, right? It was like a near impossible task. So Martin sends me a text, yesterday, and he goes, "Why don't we just do 10? Because this is near impossible." I'm like, thank you. I totally agree. Because I was going to reach out to you and say, like, all right, we got to do something with this because this is really hard. So today we're going to do our 10 favorite productions from Martin Birch. And to also go back to what we were discussing privately, Martin, I decided not to do any of the engineered
Oh,
album.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because for everybody who, if you've looked at the career of Martin Birch, he engineered a ton of albums as well, very notable albums that had like a separate producer and in many cases a notable producer. So originally I was going to throw a couple of those in there, but then, you know, how much, you never know, like who does most of the work, the producer, the engineer. It's hard to say, right? So I figured let me just stick to the ones that he was the only guy in the studio with the band. So I kind of left it at that. So we've got 10 each. Do we want to do two at a time, Martin?
Sure. Okay, two at a time. That sounds fine. Yeah, my ridiculous. Hang on, my ridiculous Martin Birch story is that God love him when he was alive. I would email him and he'd email me back right away with little answers and stuff, and we'd banter back and forth. And he was always reticent to do interviews. And then he just said, yeah, I'll give you a call. Yeah, or I can't remember what he said, but I might have been kind of pressing him a little. Oh, let's do an interview. It'd be nice to do an interview at some point, right? And in my office, I went to take a leak, and the phone rang, and I missed him, and he left me a message, and I couldn't get him back, and I never ended up talking to him. So
Wow.
literally, that was my chance to probably do the first of many interviews with him. But I can't hear my landline at the other end of my office, right? So that's what happened. So yeah, but he was so nice on email and stuff. But yeah, I regret never getting to talk to him in person. And I remember reading it. Well, actually, that's going to come to light when I do my first one. So Bullets called Cultosaurus erectus. I'm going with this first. And the other reason we wanted to do 10 is we know there's going to be overlap, and I think it's good now, extra value in seeing what the ranking is. But I picked this because this is a very Martin Birch type production, and he doesn't really have a particular sound. But the one thing I gleaned from that one interview that I read from him ages ago, I think it was in Kerrang, is that he did talk lovingly about mid range, right? And just dialing in those sounds so they don't compete with each other. But I do like a lot of stuff in the mid range, and to me, this has a very most people wouldn't say this is a great production, but I think it's a more or less correct production. It's got a lot of mid range, so it's got that vitality of the mid range. The drums are pushed to the middle as well. The guitars are nice and forward. They have to deal with a keyboardist as well, and a couple of different. Well, actually, I think it's three different singers, maybe even four different singers on some. I'm not sure, but yeah, I think this is a very Martin Birch like production. I think it's pretty darn good, but it's not anything you'd call amazing. But it's just Martin Birch like. Number 9, I went with Iron Maiden Killers. So this is the first one he does for Iron Maiden after Maiden has a not too satisfying situation with Will Malone on the first one. And this album is it's like an exciting, visceral, again fairly mid-rangey. I don't feel a lot of high fidelity at the end of Clive Burr's cymbals or hi-hats. I don't hear a lot of bottom end on the bass. I think one nice thing about this is you do get Steve Harris playing not plucky clanky bass. You get a good bass tone out of him, but it doesn't dominate the mix either. So this is just a good, vital, exciting, very new wave of British heavy metal sounding production out of Martin Birch. So that's my first two.
And would you agree that no other Maiden album quite sounds like that one?
That's absolutely true. Yep.
Right.
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So just to give everybody a little insight to where I was coming from here. So again, like we've talked about on past episodes, we're trying to pick these in order of how they sound, not so much, well, these are our favorite albums, right? So it's kind of hard to separate sometimes. But so I looked at all the stuff that he had worked on, and obviously there's a lot of favorite albums here. And your point about this whole mid-rangey thing as like a trademark, because he doesn't really have a specific sound, but there is this consistency with this mid-rangey thing going on across a lot of these albums. So I totally agree with that. And my number 10 is going to be Peace of Mind by Iron Maiden. And yeah, there is this kind of the music, the frequencies of things just kind of sit in a certain place on here. It's a pretty damn good sounding album. It's one of my favorite Maiden albums. I don't think it's my favorite Maiden production, however. I think Nico is produced very, very well on here. He's got this way with drummers, which I really like. And I'll bring it up when Killers comes, but and you kind of hit the nail on the head. He really produced Harris extremely well on that Killers album. And I would argue that he doesn't sound as good as that on any other Maiden album. We'll get to that in a couple minutes.
Point, yeah.
But yeah, but this is it's signature Martin Birch production here. I think it's a really good sounding album. Not one of the best, but still really, really good. Great songs, by the way. But yeah. So that's my number 10. I almost didn't include my number 9. But then I was like, because I don't think in all the years, well, you and I specifically, but I think in all the years that I've talked about this album, it's always been more about the songs and never about, wow, the production of that is so good. But I was like listening to it and thinking, well, it's pretty damn good, but it's not something we normally talk about when we talk about this album, and that's Rainbow Rising. Again, this whole mid-rangey thing, right? And, maybe the way Dio's voice sits in the mix, I think is a highlight of this album. But like, I don't particularly think that Richie's guitar sounds all that spectacular from a production standpoint. It's amazing. I think Tony Carey's keyboards sound really good. I don't know. What do you think about Cozy's drums on here? It's
Yeah, I actually did a podcast episode where I said, is this the birth of the Reinhold Mack sound? Because Reinhold Mack is thanked there. It's recorded at Musicland.
Yep.
And I wonder if I think there might be a couple of engineers listed there, but I feel like you get a real Mack sound out of Cozy Powell there, and it's a sound we ascribe to Cozy, but I think it might be a sound we should ascribe to Mack because from there you move on to the Mack sound that you get with Queen and
I was
Billy
going to say,
Squier.
yeah, Roger Taylor, certainly. Right?
ELO, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's possible that was a very Musicland thing. So yeah, and it's something I never really liked, but I'm glad it exists. It's like an eccentric sound. It's very, very thwappy. It sounds like everything's loose and very, very bright and distorted at the cymbal end. The cymbals just go on forever, kind of thing, and not super high fidelity either.
No.
But yeah, pretty interesting. That we always talk about his sound on that album, and it could have a lot to do with Mac.
Yeah, it could be. But it was just interesting to kind of think of Rainbow Rising from a production standpoint, because I don't know if I've ever actually done that before. I think we always kind of take for granted. It's like, we love this album so much. It's got all these classics on it.
Yeah.
But we're like, but does it really sound all that great? It's like it does, but it's not like you said, you talk about this high fidelity thing. That's not Rainbow Rising, I don't think. But I think everything is very well placed in the mix, and I think it deserves to be on this list. So it's my number 9. I didn't want to put it too high because I think there are much better productions, but it's got to be on here somewhere. So.
All right. My number 8, I went with Whitesnake, Slide It In. Pete kind of likes this band.
Yeah, just a little bit, right?
Yeah, just a little bit. And this, I think, it also has that Martin Birchness to it. It is also mid-rangey and vital and exciting and visceral. It's a little arena rocking, a little stadium rocking, and it's bare bones. It just feels like it's all about those guitars, and I guess you'd call this a dry drum sound, right? Um, and yeah, it's continuing on with kind of the cozy sound. I think you definitely get a cozy sound out of this, but it's not particularly bassy. I think they have earlier albums that there's more traditional 70s bass on than this album. I
Yep.
think this album seems primed for radio. It seems produced for success.
Yep.
And that's what I like about it.
Yeah, the guitars are kind of kicked up to 11 on that, and I would argue that that's probably the best produced Coverdale to date at that time because I think Coverdale sounds amazing on that album.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Um, Number 7, I went with Power Slave. And I had Peace of Mind in my honorable mentions or get kicked off the list earlier, but I wanted to go with this because I feel like they established their sound on Peace of Mind, and then Martin even dials it in even more so. He's really getting the Iron Maidenness out of Steve on this album. Finally, like he's really getting that more articulated Steve. But Nico is a big challenge, and he's an interesting challenge. He's got so much personality, and I think you get that out of this. And I like the way that things sound loose and playful. It sounds like they had a lot of fun doing it. I talk to the guys, and they talk about drinking and stuff, and go out and having a good time making this record. And I think you can hear that on here. It just has a loose enthusiasm to it. I always talk about this being like a Iron Maiden establishes their sound on Peace of Mind, but it's sober and conservative, and this is more like a 3 beer kind of situation. So there you go. That's my number 7.
And would you agree that they truly, or he, Martin, captured the epicness of that album with the production? Because I think the
Yeah.
production matches the lyrical themes and the cover artwork and everything about it. I think it's just absolutely perfect.
Yeah. And also I feel like there's a little bit of the spirit of Number of the Beast on it too, production wise.
Yeah, that definitely makes
Yeah.
sense. Yep. All right. So you mentioned this whole kind of dry production style. I think that Martin Birch, besides for this whole mid-rangey thing, I think one of the things that stands out, especially when you look at some certain productions that he did for specific bands, you have this kind of wet and dry thing going on. To me, I think the perfect representation of the kind of the dry production sound that he's known for is Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath, as opposed to the other one that I'll get to in a little bit. But this is, first of all, I think what is great about the production on this album is it helped bring Sabbath into a new era because this doesn't sound anything like any Sabbath album that came before it. And I'm not just talking about the songs and the arrangements. I'm talking production wise. It's got this dry kind of like clean slate type of thing. Everything is perfectly up in the mix. Tony is produced really, really well on here. Again, it's not this kind of dark, dingy, doomy kind of production style that permeates a lot of the earlier Sabbath records, which I love, don't get me wrong. But this is totally new and fresh for him. Ronnie sounds amazing on here. I think Bill's drums are produced very, very well too. And it's kind of a shame that like this would be his kind of end in the band for a little bit. But I think this is a really, really good production, but it's a very different from the album that will come after it, and I'll talk about that in just a little bit. Spoiler alert. But yeah, Heaven and Hell. And then I'll also echo Cultosaurus Erectus. And again, this whole wet dry thing. I think of the two BOC albums, this is more of the drier one. The other one, which I'm sure we'll both talk about, is the wet one. Um, I kind of like there's a lack of dynamics in this product on the production of this, but I think it really works for these songs. There's not like when you listen to this album, nothing like some albums, the guitars really stand out, the vocals really stand out, or maybe the keyboards, or the drums or whatever. I think everything is kind of playing on an even level on here, and I think it really, really works. It's got, like I said, that dry production sound, but it's not as busy as some of the productions on BOC albums that came right before it. Certainly different from the more raw stuff in the beginning of the band's catalog. But I think this might be one of the, dare I say, classiest productions that they had on an album to date, if that makes any sense. But yeah, I like it though. I think it really suits the songs that are on here. But it's just amazing like how much different this album sounds than the next one. Which again, the comparisons between the two Sabbath albums and the two Blue Oyster Cult albums are so similar in the way I look at the productions of both albums. So, but we'll get to that because we got more to come. So there you go.
That's interesting the way you put that. And then as you went on and described it, it was almost like you were talking about the modern day phenomenon of brick walling, right? So it's almost like an early analog version of a concept around brick walling. If which is bringing everything to sound at the same sort of volume on it, and you do
Yeah.
hear that on that record.
Yeah.
It's kind of neat, and it's the positive aspect of brick walling, and so Martin Birch was almost kind of like saying, can we figure out a way to have everything sound loud at the same
Right.
time, kind of thing.
Like
Yeah.
we've had this conversation about that album, like and a while ago, where we talked about how Cultosaurus erectus is not as heavy as we've always thought it is, right? Listening to it today with our
Yeah.
2025 ears. And is that due to the fact of the way, well, like I just explained, how the guitars are not necessarily big, high, and brash in the mix, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
just everything is kind of like where it's at. And these songs always seemed heavier to us, but going back and listening to it, like, it's really not that heavy of an album. But why did we think so back in the day? And could a little bit of tweaks with the knobs have made it sound a little different?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know.
Cool. All right, my number six. I thought let's give a little love to live album
Yeah, there you
production.
go.
I
Yeah.
think this is an incredible sounding album. People love it to death, and I think one of the reasons they love it is it does have that bright, exciting production. It's good. It's not muddy, and it captures the band on all cylinders. It's almost like a tribute to all those things a producer has to do on live albums. I'm sure, like picking versions and checking stuff and fixing mistakes and all that sort of thing. But it's just lived on as a great album. No one's ever complained about the production. It's easy to screw up the production of a live album. He doesn't screw it up here. So my number five, I'm going with Whitesnake, Ready and Willing. I've always found this to be a very again, very Martin Birch like production. It's very classy to match the classiness of the material. I think you just get a good level of kind of like magnetism and personality out of the songs. It feels like the band has purpose for the first time here. I think they're a little all over the place on Trouble and Love Hunter, and yeah, Martin captures it. It's a very it sounds a little bit like Come and Get It. It sounds nothing like Saints and Sinners, and it sounds a little bit like Slide It In, I think, production wise. But it's an older version of the band. It's a more bluesy and traditional and not America world beating version of the band. But yeah, again, very very mid rangey, but there's just something classy about it to match the cover art. So there you go. That's my six and five.
Yeah, it's a good choice. I have that in my honorable mentions. I really like. I think he was doing some really good work with the band right around that time. That's like a nice little run of albums, not just material wise, but I think also the way they sound. So good choice. My what are we at? Number six. My number six is Killers by Iron Maiden. I agree with you. I think this is a very exciting kind of brash production. I mainly have it this high because I absolutely love the way he produced, like I mentioned before, Steve Harris on this album. And I think Paul Di'Anno also sounds great on here. It's just, it's got it's like one of those albums. It sounds like it came from that scene, but yet it's got that extra edge on the production, which I think really kind of elevates it among like some of the other bands who are releasing albums from this era. Like the Saxons of the world and everybody else. I really dig it. And I think this production has aged really well. Like for some reason, like I find as time goes on, I hold this album in higher esteem than I ever did. I mean, this is becoming my favorite Iron Maiden album. And I think it's not just because of the songs and the performances, but I think it's just a great sounding album. And I just really love it's kind of raw, but not overly raw. I don't know. It's just it really works for me. And as time goes on, I love it even more. So yeah, that's my number six. And my number five has got to be sliding in. I always loved the way this album sounded. Always loved it. Yeah, it definitely sounds like they were trying to beef up the sound a little bit. The guitars are cranked up to 11, which, like you mentioned, perfect for American audiences at the time. Uh, as I said before, I think Coverdale, I don't know if he's ever sounded better than on this album. I think he's just produced spectacularly. I like Cozy's drums. Maybe it's missing a little bit of John Lord in the mix, but to your point about how the couple albums that came before, they were going more for that kind of 70s bluesy rock style, where I think Hammond organ has a little bit more space. I think by the time we get to here, I think Martin and probably Coverdale were probably thinking, all right, let's keep John a little bit down because we want the guitars to really show up because we're going for that more guitar male oriented audience, right? So I think it really works. So yeah, that's my number five. Slide
Sweet. All right. My number four, I'm going with Fire of Unknown Origin. This has now pretty much become my favorite Blue Oyster Cult album. What I love about the production of it is that he deftly figures out what to do with Alan Lanier as Alan moves from a keyboardist and a piano player into a new wavy synthesizer type player. I think there's great recordings of synths on here. And again, I think you get a real Martin Birchness in the fact that it doesn't have a heck of a lot of bottom end. It's got a punchy bass drum, it's got a loud snare drum on it. Everything sounds fine in the mix. The guitars aren't particularly crazy distorted. But it's a fairly heavy Blue Oyster Cult album, anyways. So yeah, I just think he does a beautiful job of bringing the band into the '80s and making them relevant in the '80s. I don't think you really get that on Cultosaurus. This is just a brighter, more let's participate in the world of modern music sort of album. And next, I'm going with number three. I'm going with Heaven and Hell. So again, this record, I love the way that it is quite eccentrically produced. Even though it has that quality of smushing things into the mid range. Yeah, Bill sounds very vital and alive and new, much more so than he was in the studio because he's drinking a lot at this point. Like it's hard getting the performances at him, but he never sounded more Bill Ward gone to the gym as he does on this album, kind of thing. And yeah, the guitars are just again just moving the band into the '80s. The guitars just hit you right between the eyes. It's a very vital, promising band and promising sound, enthusiastic sound. Which is a good metaphor for the band moving forward. What are our possibilities in the '80s with Ronnie James Dio? And I think the production serves as a perfect metaphor from that. You put it perfectly. The break in production is just the '70s are gone. Here's something new, and it's not particularly new wavy new. It's not like the Blue Oyster Cult album, but it's more like. It's more like here's something completely brand new that we haven't done before, and I like how you use the word fresh for it as well. It's just a very springy, energetic sort of production on here. Just bare bones reminds me. It's just bass guitar and drums and vocals kind of feel to the album. So there is my 4 and 3.
I mean, just listen to that album back to back with Never Say Die.
Yeah, oh,
It's like a completely different band, right?
yeah,
I
yeah,
mean, it doesn't sound anything. I mean, I even go back to Technical Ecstasy, right? Listen to those two albums and put on Heaven and Hell. You're like, whoa, this
yeah,
is like something fresh and just, yeah,
yeah,
completely different.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. All right. Power Slave is number four for me. Another album that I think, as time goes on, just keeps rising up album ranks for me as far as the Maiden catalog goes. And like I mentioned before, I just think that the production of this kind of takes the Peace of Mind, what they were doing with Peace. It basically takes Number of the Beast and Peace of Mind and makes it sound even a little more epic. I think that it was a great way to capture the whole epicness of this whole album. I mean, I remember the first time I listened to like Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner, I was like, holy crap, listen to that. That's like as majestic as metal is ever going to get. And he does that throughout the album on here. And I think, like the first single was 2 Minutes to Midnight. And that's like your typical Martin Birch production style there. But I would argue across a lot of the rest of this album, like the title track, I mean, that's some really good stuff going on that he was doing in the studio here. So I really like this production a lot. I think to me, it's the grandest Maiden production out of all of them. And that's why it's at number 4 for me. And my number 3, I'm also going to pick Cultosaurus. I mean, Fire of Unknown Origin from Blue Oyster Cult. What I really like about this production as opposed to Cultosaurus erectus, he was able to dive. There's a lot of little nuances on this album, Martin. And I
Yeah.
think you hit the nail on the head when you talked about he really figured out how to really utilize Alan Lanier on here because there are some really interesting synth things going on this album. And again, like with the other album, this is not necessarily a big guitar album, but it's the way all these kind of cool keyboard effects and the way things are placed with the guitars, with all the vocals, and it's a great sounding album, and it sounds so fresh for this kind of new decade that the band is coming in. And I don't think that they ever really quite captured what they captured in the studio on any albums going forward. Different ways for sure. But I think this is a pretty artful album. We use this term all the time, art rock. Like, what the fuck is art rock, right? I would argue that this is art rock to me.
Yeah.
It's not heavy metal, it's hard rock for sure, but there is a classy artfulness about this album that is partly due to the production, partly due to the songwriting and the arranging. But I think, and like you mentioned, this has become your favorite Blue Oyster Cult. There are days, I mean, I always say Secret Treaties is my favorite Blue Oyster Cult record.
Mhm.
But sometimes I have to stop and say, all right, what's my favorite album from the early period and what's my favorite from the latter period? Because very different band, really, when you think about it, as far as like what type of music they're doing. I have a hard time now, like not, also claiming this is either tied for my first or this is number 2. I think this is an amazing, amazing record that I loved back then and I love even more now. And I think Martin, this is one of my, obviously it sits at number 3 for me. So it's one of my favorite Martin Birch productions of all time. So yeah, Fire of
Nice.
Unknown Origin, number 3.
Yeah, you bring up a great point. I mean, the producer is also the guy who has to work on getting all those crazy little sound effects and stuff in there. You think of Joan Crawford on that thing?
Oh, yeah, exactly, right?
Piles of the songs have stuff going on, right? And it's probably as I scan this list, it's probably the most fanciest, complicated album, and yet it's one of the most modern sounding. I mean, it,
Right.
it sounds vital and modern, and yet you kind of forget how much crazy stuff's going on
Yeah.
all over it.
And you know
Yeah,
what song doesn't really work on that album from a production standpoint? Heavy Metal Black and Silver.
exactly.
Right?
Yeah,
Because the
totally.
guitars
Yeah,
have no heft to them. It's
yeah,
like it's one of those songs that wants to be like a heavy metal song, and I'm like, but yet the production kind of stops it from really being that.
exactly.
Whereas
Yeah,
the rest of the album sounds spectacular from a production standpoint.
yeah. Yeah, wicked. Yeah, I always call that the band's first Stranglers album. And yeah, that song, we're supposed to love it. It's the heaviest thing on it, and yet it falls short, right? So okay, my number 2, I went with Michael Schenker Group Assault Attack. And as I scan this list, I think this sounds most like Ready and Willing and Slide It In. I think you've got a real stadium rock sound on this. The guitars are front and center. They're large. They occupy like a large mid range space. And the drums are incredibly punchy on it. Ted McKenna, right? And yeah, punchy bass drum, big snare drum. Graham sounds good on it. So yeah, this is a very mid-range but tough, muscular sort of sound. Like the picture of the guys on
Oh
the
yeah.
right. Yeah, there you go. There's the tough Michael Schenker group. Yeah, absolute classic album. So yeah, very very Martin Birch.
That's probably the
Um,
one and only time that Graham Bonnet ever wore a leather jacket.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And okay, and my last one is an album that doesn't sound like classic Martin Birch. Mob Rules. I just love the absolute. I think we're going to hear about this one a little bit from you, so I'll keep it short. But yeah, I mean, absolutely massive molten bottom end on it. Captures Vinny Appice perfectly. Big, massive. You think of big drums, drumsticks, huge guitar sound on it as well. Bassy. So, a polar opposite of Heaven and Hell, just a really powerful, great sounding album and high fidelity enough as well. But you could tell, this is I scanned this whole list, and by far, this is the album with the most bottom end. So Mob Rules.
Yep. My number two is Assault Attack by Michael Schenker Group.
Funny.
Uh, I would argue that Michael has never sounded better on any album he's ever appeared on. He's just his guitar is like immense on here. I don't think Graham Bonnet has ever sounded better on any album he's ever done, and I'm a fan of both of these guys. Yeah, this is pretty intense stuff here, and I think the songs are great. That helps, but I think that Martin Birch just really got the best out of all these guys in the studio. To say that like none of them have ever sounded better on this album, that's down to the producer, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
Pete, I just to raise a point, Graham Bonnet, it's almost like Graham Bonnet's voice is perfect for Martin Birch to be producing him because he sings powerful and there's some version of high that you get out of his voice,
yep.
but it's a vocal fry version of high. So it's a version of high that seems to relish and celebrate the upper end of the mid range. And I think that's just perfect for Martin Birch. It's like his voice is a Martin Birch production on its own.
Yep. I've often thought that how would it have been, how would it have sounded if Martin Birch would have produced that first Alcatraz album?
Yeah.
Not that I dislike the production on that album, I
Yeah.
don't, but I'm just wondering, could you imagine if that album had a little bit of the grit that this
Yeah.
one has?
Yeah. That's a very eccentric sounding album, right? It
Yes.
reminds me of Judas Priest Stained Class. It's
Yeah.
just so finicky and high and strange, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I,
Wow.
I like that point. I would have liked to have heard Martin work with Graham Bonnet more because I think they would be perfect together. He's got, I mean, obviously throughout everything we've been talking about today, he's worked with some really good vocalists and has really elevated them on these albums. So I totally would have liked to have heard him work on some Alcatraz albums or anything else that Graham Bonnet was involved with. So yeah, that's my number two. And my number one, Martin and I are in sync on the final two here, Mob Rules. So I was just sitting there thinking about it. I'm like, I was talking earlier about this wet production style that comes up from time to time. It's this one. And I
Yeah.
agree with you 100%. There's so much bottom end on this album. I almost sometimes when I'm listening to Mob Rules and I think of this wet production style from Martin Birch, I think of like Tony Iommi like hitting that first big doomy chord on Sign of the Southern Cross and like a big swath of sweat comes off his guitar, goes to the wall and drips down the wall, right? That's what it's like, or like Vinny hits that and like all of a sudden water goes flying all over the place. That's what I get from this album. It's alive. It's like in your face and it's just dripping with whatever. I don't know. I think this album sounds immense and, maybe it doesn't quite have some of the out and out classic songs that Heaven and Hell does, but I just find that the Heaven and Hell production, I think, was perfect for the time and where they needed to be. But I think that this album catches the essence of Black Sabbath from a production standpoint just a little bit better. I mean, man, like the title track, Sign of the Southern Cross, Voodoo. I mean, everything on here is just pulsating and just, I don't know. It's hard to put into words. But this to me is, you mentioned visceral before. That's that.
Yeah.
It's just so alive and pulsating. It oozes everything that is Black Sabbath. And yeah, to me, this without question was my number one.
I love the way you put that. I mean, captures the essence of Black Sabbath. So we know Black Sabbath has all sorts of different productions, but it captures the essence. It's almost the most ideal version of what you think Black Sabbath should sound like, right? And two other albums that get to that place are Born Again and Master of Reality, right? Those are the two gluiest, thickest,
Yeah.
boulders rolling down a mountain sort of sounding records of theirs,
Yeah.
right?
And
And
people can
yeah,
cut on Born Again all they want, right, about the
yeah,
production of that. We've lived with Born Again now for 40 some odd years, right?
yeah,
Is it a weird production? 100%.
yeah,
But isn't that the essence of Black Sabbath, right? This
yeah,
dark, dingy, massive, just
yeah,
ugly kind of sound.
yeah.
That. So I don't really have an issue with the Born Again production anymore. Am I intrigued to hear a remix? 100%. And I'm sure we'll get it. But I still think, man, that's Sabbath at their darkest, dingiest, and heaviest, right? What do you want, right? Because I can't imagine Born Again sounding like Heaven and Hell, right?
Yeah,
It wouldn't work.
yeah,
It just wouldn't work.
yeah, yeah, and basically, Mob Rules is the best version of that trio of the essence of Black
Yeah,
Sabbath albums.
yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the way that lineup needs to sound. Like, what are your thoughts? Not to derail the conversation, but what are your thoughts on the Dehumanizer production?
Yeah, I don't like it very much at all. And that's a late period Mac production,
Right.
right? So there you're getting the Cozy Powell drums out of Vinny Appice there. And it's very dirty and mid-rangey and
Really dirty.
distorted.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Flappy and yeah, and yeah, in conjunction with the songs, which are a little more downwound, a little bit slower, right? Yeah, that's got it. The word that comes to mind is floundering. That album sounds like it's like they're floundering because of the production.
Yeah, because some of the songs like sound like they needed a little something extra.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, you get there because there's a couple of like I think I is that sounds absolutely perfect, but there's other songs on that record that I don't think the production quite helps enough with.
But
But
still there's a little bit of that is it the essence of the band, and it's kind of like yes, and then even the Heaven and Hell album later, that's kind of the essence of the band too. So there's a few that go to this place. Might be
yeah,
a very strange but interesting episode or topic one day, right?
yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
yeah.
All right, so as we discussed and we made the decision on the fly, the next episode will be all about Roy Thomas Baker. So we'll be, in addition to paying tribute to our fallen producer, we're going to talk about the many cool productions that he had done in his career. There's a lot of them. Work with a lot of different types of musical acts and bands and whatnot, which I think is cool. Something like today. Martin Birch kind of had his place in with the hard rock and metal bands. Although, we didn't really discuss it because we decided not to do the stuff that he worked on as an engineer. But he worked with Fleetwood Mac for all those years. And I was thinking, that the band Toad, that first album, he was the engineer on that. That's an amazing sounding album. Again, how much he had to do with that, well, I don't really know. And he also worked with Deep Purple for most of those 70s,
Right.
right?
Pete, and the other thing we didn't mention is he did that rare thing that producers I don't know anybody else who's done this, but he went exclusive with Iron Maiden.
Yeah.
At one point he decided I'm gonna go, and then he retired early too. He
Yes.
decided, okay, I've had enough, I've done all I can do. When things weren't going so great with Maiden productions later on, and he was probably having some pushback and thinking maybe the sound probably should change. Because they kind of stuck in a rut, and then it really became a rut. And then yeah, he retired. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting because I did the tribute to Roy Thomas Baker the other day, and I was looking back on his career. He is another guy who kind of like just stopped after a while. I think a lot of these guys, they did they put in their time in the 70s and the 80s, and then they just kind of cherry pick what they wanted to do, and eventually they just said, okay, that's it. I'm sure these guys are well paid, right? They don't need to be working till they're 75, 80 years old. So I totally get it. But yeah, I mean, Martin Birch, great career, so many beloved albums by all of us hard rock and metal fans, right? So
yeah.
For everybody watching, rank your favorite productions from Martin Birch down in the comments below. Martin, get us caught up on books and podcasts and contrarians and all that good stuff. I know you're a busy
Yeah, so
guy.
I've been doing a lot of contrarians shows, so there's a lot to see there on YouTube. And like I say, just did this review of Metallica. I've got the audio podcast, History in Five Songs with Martin Popoff, the one I do with John Gaffney, Kicked in the Teeth, an AC/DC podcast. My pricing went up for the new Iron Maiden book, so that's behind me here somewhere. And so taking a lot of orders for that. So that's the big one. Guns N' Roses book coming in a couple of weeks. Yeah, it's pretty much everything.
What's the weight on that Maiden book?
Yeah, it was coming in every time I weighed it in the box. I think it was coming in at 8 pounds, something like that. Is what it ships out at, something like that. So yeah, it's the longest book I ever did, 666 pages. It's a mammoth. The deal's going to be big too, and then coming down the road, 7 decades of Deep Purple is going to be even bigger than this one.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'll be looking forward to that one. That's going to be a good one. Just when just when you thought that you've read more than you'll ever need to read on a band you love, Martin's coming out with something even bigger.
Yeah, that's got to be the biggest, most definitive thing that's ever going to come out on Deep Purple. I imagine it just went on and on and on. It's like, man, it became hard to write just and get the picture sorted out because it just was so long, right? So it's a little bit like that Stephen Colbert funny quip when Rush played live. Is like, did you ever get to the end of a song and realize that the writing of the song at the end was influenced by you earlier on in the song? So it felt a little bit like that doing that Deep Purple book.
So this will be how many Purple books for you now?
Well, there was the two timeline books, and then
Yep.
the very very early, biography type normal books. And this is so, and they fed off of that, but they've been so updated because I've interviewed the guys for every studio album in the last, all the Steve Morse era, right, and Simon McBride era. So it's those ones. I think that's it. So the two timeline books and the two very early books, which were terrible. I mean, they were low production values. I kind of did most of it myself, two of my earliest books. But so this is a massive expanded version of that. But yeah, in that family, there's the Dio books, which is now the big Dio book. There's the Rainbow books, a couple of Rainbow books. So I've done the whole family. It's like when I met with Geezer, I gave him a bunch of books with all this Sabbath. I said, Geezer, here's the Geezer, here's the Black Sabbath stalker pack, right? Because I think some of these bands must think I'm like I'd be a crazy stalker if they got too close to me because of the pile of stuff I've written on them. So
I just heard, speaking of Purple, I just heard that they're working on a new album.
wow,
It's quick, right?
yeah,
I
that's
guess
wild.
they're feeling
Yeah.
inspired with Simon in the band now, so that's kind of cool. They're working with Bob Ezrin again, and we just did the Bob Ezrin show. What'd you think of the new Alice Cooper group
I
song?
haven't played the song yet, but I heard some negative reviews of it, so it'll be interesting to hear what the whole album's going to be. I'm glad they're doing this. I mean, it's not like they haven't done this already a little bit here and there, right? They
Right.
played live. These guys have guested and stuff, but yeah, this is the and it's remarkable that a band that early that they're all there, other than Glenn Buxton. I mean, you've got a full band because you've got a bass player, you got a guitar player, you got a drummer, you got Alice, right?
Yeah.
You literally got a full band.
Yeah. Yeah.
So pretty
If
neat.
you need a lead guitar player, you can get that, right? And I think the story is that they had enough stuff in the vaults, Glenn doing solos and things like that, that they'll be able to flesh out a couple tracks on the album that'll feature him. So yeah, we'll see. I'll let you. I won't talk because I did a review of it
All right.
yesterday, and I'm curious to hear what your thoughts are of the song. So I think they capture the vibe pretty well, which
I just saw a couple negative comments, and I saw some people complaining a little about Road, the album Road too, right? Not really liking that very much. So
yeah, I thought Roe was pretty good. I liked it. Yeah.
yeah.
So we'll see. I'm looking forward to hearing this. So it's been a long time since the all the boys got together and did a whole album. So this will be pretty cool. So
Nice.
all right, that's a wrap, everybody. Taking a look at Martin Birch. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Roy Thomas Baker. Till then, visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook. We're on YouTube all together all the damn time. Please subscribe if you have or haven't already and click on that notification bell so you get alerted of all of our content as a post. And please hit that like button before you leave. Coming up here on the channel, we've got tomorrow. From the UK connection, Simon and Stephen, all on their own, talking about some old and some newer UK bands. They're going to be talking about City Boy and Massive Wagons. That's coming up tomorrow. Jamie Laszlo and the review crew coming up tomorrow as well. We've got a triple shot of ranking the album shows on Sunday. Louis Nasser is going to be doing Blank Manuscript, this cool Austrian art rock band. There's that term again, Martin. Art rock, what is it? I don't know. Who knows? We've also got Grant Arthur and myself are going to be ranking the albums of Brownsville Station. Lynn Versace and I are going to be ranking the albums of Zebra. And that's what you got this weekend. So enjoy it all. And please go check out Martin's links and things. And we'll see you next time here at the Funhouse for Martin Popoff. I am Pete Pardo. Enjoy your weekend, everybody. Take care.